here. All right. There we go. So, hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you for joining us today. We're talking about suddenly becoming a caregiver. I really, really love this topic because I think that at some point in all of our lives, we're faced with becoming a caregiver. And so personally and professionally, I've had the opportunity to start and take the caregiving journey with many people. And so I've learned a lot of things along the way. And so I hope to be able to share some things about navigating the caregiver journey with all of you today. So from this presentation, what I hope for everybody to gain is a basic understanding of what a caregiver does, to identify some tips and resources that may help or support you as a caregiver with navigating this journey. And also to understand what caregiver fatigue is, what it looks like, and to identify some strategies to prevent it. So who is a caregiver? If someone asks you who is a caregiver or what is a caregiver, what might you say? I think that 14 years ago, before I entered healthcare, if I had been asked what a caregiver was, I would probably imagine or describe someone, a nurse who cares for the elderly in a nursing home, right? So there can be so many different ideas about who a caregiver can be. So a caregiver is any person or professional who assists with another person's health or social needs. So this, in fact, can be a family member, it can be a nurse, it can be a doctor, it can be anybody who attends to a person's health or social needs. And for the sake of this presentation, when we talk about a caregiver, we're going to be talking about a family caregiver. So a caregiver who is caring for a loved one in a home setting. So a friend or a family member, a loved one in a home setting. So we'll start by talking about some situations that can lead to a person becoming a caregiver. So having elderly or aging loved ones, many of you may be familiar, or maybe you yourself has cared for your elderly parents as they begin aging, or, you know, if their health decline, or maybe even another family member. So this is a situation that may have you suddenly become a caregiver, even though you didn't plan to. A decline in health or functional status of a loved one. So maybe your loved one is now ill, or they're becoming, you know, they're not able to do things independently as they normally were. Maybe they had an accident, and so now they have some challenges in terms of functioning independently. So this may be a situation that has now put you in the position to suddenly become a caregiver. A new or terminal diagnosis could lead to you becoming a caregiver. So maybe a loved one has now been diagnosed with a terminal illness. And so maybe they're having a health decline as well, or a functional status decline. So this may cause you to now be in the position of becoming a caregiver. And then also a change in family or support structure. Perhaps a family member has passed away, and now you're assuming responsibility for another family member, or maybe their children. So this is also an event that could lead you to suddenly becoming a caregiver. So what do caregivers do? Being a caregiver, it is such a big role, and it comes with a lot of responsibilities. Some may think that a caregiver just feeds people and gives them baths and kind of tucks them in, but truly, it is so much more when you're committing yourself, your time, and your resources to making sure that a loved one is provided quality care. So caregiving involves supporting the daily needs of a loved one. And these things may include, bathing and dressing, grocery shopping. Maybe we're, preparing meals for them, right? Transportation, getting them to where they need to go, medical appointments, important appointments, errands. So those are some things that caregivers may do. Monitoring health conditions. This is a big one if you're a caregiver for a loved one that is ill. So making sure that they stay up to date with medications and that they're seeing their doctor and getting to their doctor appointments as they need to. This could be something that a caregiver is doing as well. Emotional support and companionship. This is another big one. Caregiving is not just some of the things we mentioned before this one, the bathing and the dressing and to taking care of their health, but really also being there for them, making sure that their mental health is good, that we're spending time with them, giving them what they need to feel supported and to feel happy about living the life that they're living. So that emotional support and companionship is certainly something that a caregiver does for their loved one. And then medical proxy or a healthcare advocate. So a caregiver can also be involved in making decisions, healthcare decisions for a loved one who may not be able to make those decisions on their own, or even supporting them in making those decisions. And so this is not an all-inclusive list of things that caregivers do, because they do a wealth of things, but these are some of the things that a caregiver may do when they're caring for their loved ones. So family caregiving versus professional caregiving. So when faced with the possibility of becoming a caregiver, a common source of confusion is whether or not to put their loved one into a facility where they can get care, or to actually care for them at home. I've had many people say, I don't know if I can care for mom at home. Is this the right thing? Can we or should we? So at this point, it really can be a source of confusion and can cause some anxiety. I think it's great if you're in this position to explore what are some of the pros and cons of caring for a family member or becoming a caregiver. And this may help to find some clarity and decide whether or not becoming a family caregiver is right for you, your loved one, and your family. So some pros of family caregiving, certainly relationship building. You really get to spend this time with your loved one. You get to be there with them. You get to build upon a relationship, a great relationship that you already had, or maybe mending one that was not so great, or developing one that was not present. So that certainly is a positive thing in becoming a caregiver for a loved one. You also get to be a part of increasing their quality of life. You really get to be present and get to share in and be a part of that experience for them, which is also a really positive thing about being a family caregiver. There's an opportunity to save you or your loved ones money. So not putting them in a facility or a home and deciding to care for them yourself, maybe in your home or their home, can certainly be a financial benefit. So this could certainly be a positive thing in becoming a caregiver. And then also you get to retain visibility and control over their care. So again, you get to be present, you get to be right there, and really be a part of the decision making and deciding how care is given, versus if they were receiving professional care, maybe in a facility, you're not there all the time, and you don't necessarily have control over how care is given. So that also may be a positive in deciding to be a caregiver for your loved one. So for some cons to family caregiving, it can be time consuming. It can be a lot. It can take up a lot of your personal time. It's a huge commitment. And so that may be something to consider if you're thinking about whether or not becoming a caregiver is the right thing for you. It could also increase stress. There's a lot of demands on there, depending on what your loved one needs are, it can increase your stress level or cause you to feel overwhelmed at some points. So this is also your own mental health is certainly something to consider when deciding whether or not caregiving for a loved one is the right thing for you and your loved one. It can impact your personal schedule, having to prioritize someone else's needs. You're not always putting you first in your commitments or your work or things that are important to you. So it certainly can impact your own personal schedule, personal life. And it can complicate relationships when you become the caregiver for someone. It can complicate your relationship. It can bring forth dynamics that did not exist. So sometimes that may be a drawback to wanting to become a caregiver for your loved one. So how can caregiving impact the caregiver? So this is certainly something to consider if you're becoming a caregiver for your loved one is what can I expect? How can this impact me? So there can be emotional disturbances. I think that, not just maybe the shock of this being a new situation, but sometimes there's guilt, sometimes there's feelings of overwhelm. So these can be all things that a caregiver can experience. Isolation and loneliness. So depending on whether or not you have help or you have support, it can feel lonely in caring for your loved one. And then relationship disturbances. Maybe you don't have as much time to spend with friends or other family members as you normally do. And caregiver burden. Sometimes caregivers can feel burdened or can feel overwhelmed. And really what all of these things kind of equate to is what's called caregiver fatigue. And we'll talk a little bit more about caregiver fatigue later in some ways to how we can prevent caregiver fatigue when we've decided that caregiving for our loved one is what we're going to do. So now that we know a little bit about caregivers, what to expect, how we can become caregivers, how do we get started? So what are the steps? Now you're in the situation and suddenly I'm going to be the caregiver for my loved one. What is the first thing to do? So many things to do, but do I make calls? Do I set appointments? What things do I need to focus on as I'm getting started with becoming a caregiver for my loved one? So taking a time out, not a phone call, not a planning, but taking a time out to really digest and debrief over the new information that you've been given or the new circumstance, right? So taking time out to really just digest what has happened. And it doesn't have to be a lot of time, but really just giving yourself a moment, allowing time for emotional responses, giving yourself some grace. It's okay to feel a little bit overwhelmed, to feel anxious about this new journey ahead, about these new responsibilities that you may now have, allowing for feelings of sadness or regret, whatever those emotions may be, but giving yourself a moment to feel those and to process. And then taking that and seeking comfort and support from your support system. So whether that's friends or families or your spouse, whoever that may be who can bring you comfort as you're debriefing and really allowing those emotional responses, allowing things to settle in, that now you're going to be providing care for your loved one. So really, before you start doing anything, taking that time out is one of the most important things that you can do on your journey of becoming a caregiver for your loved one. So next is really to prioritize immediate needs, right? Is it medical care? Is that the most important thing that we need to focus on for my loved one now? Is it finances? Is it, are we thinking about where are we going to get the money now to provide the care that we need to provide? Deciding where care will be given. Maybe, you know, our loved one is being discharged from the hospital. And so now are we going to give care at their home? Are we going to move them in with me? And then thinking about what things are actually going to be needed to start providing care for your loved ones. So these may be some things to think about and just really decide which things are the most important things, the immediate needs that we should be focusing on so that we can provide the best care that we can for our loved one. Next, we want to take inventory of available resources. This is an important one. Family and friends. Who do I have available to me immediately that would be willing to help, that can help, who is available, right? So who can I reach out to help support me as I'm beginning this journey? Do we have insurance in place? Do we have financial resources that we can tap into to be of support right now? Are there community resources? There are, you know, caregiving programs to support caregivers, both emotionally, financially, and in terms of resources. So what resources are available to me or my loved one that can help support me as we begin this journey? And care equipment. Again, what do we need to help take care of my loved one? What supplies or equipment? So these are all things, another important step as we begin this caregiver journey, and take an inventory of resources that we have available to us. The next thing that is important is to consider resources for care needs. So home health aid services is a great resource if you're needing help or support with personal care for your loved one. So there are lots of resources out there that can be of assistance with providing personal care in the home. So this may be a resource that you might want to consider when becoming a caregiver for your loved one. Visiting physicians, nurses, and social workers. These individuals can come to the home or your loved one's home to provide healthcare needs, psychosocial needs. So this may be a great resource for you to consider as you're planning what care looks like for your loved one. So meal prep or delivery services, this may also be of great support to you. It may be a time saver. It may be a resource that may help support you giving the best care to your loved one. And even laundry services. This is an up and coming one that I'm seeing a lot, but people are really utilizing this service because it helps take off one other thing that they don't have to focus on, that they can get help and support. And it really helps to provide the best care in the home setting for your loved ones. So these are all things to consider. And there are lots of other resources out there as well, but just really thinking about and taking inventory of what resources that you need to care for your loved one. Next is planning. How many people are planners? I'm a planner. Plan. I love to plan. So creating some to-do lists, really being organized, right? And so again, prioritizing those needs, getting it all written down or on paper or typed up so that you can stay organized, so that you don't miss anything, and so that you have a clear picture of what you need to do and what you need to focus on to relieve stress and keep you organized, and again, be able to provide the best care. Scheduling appointments. Maybe your loved one needs doctor's appointments or financial appointments, meeting with financial advisors, or making appointments with some of those resources that you've considered to serve as a support to you in providing care. Setting up important meetings. And then planning your free time, because that's important to take inventory as well, is what you need to feel good as you're now in this caregiving role. So really strategically planning your leisure time and your time away will certainly be helpful as you are getting into your caregiving journey. And so now that you started your journey and you've done all those things to get started, you've looked at the supports that you need, and you have gotten into your day-to-day. You've gotten into the day-to-day of caring for your loved one. You've got your routine down pat. You've got your schedule. You got all your to-do lists. You know what you're doing, when you're doing, and now you've gotten into the flow. And now you really are this extraordinary caregiver for your loved one. So now what? She looks exhausted. So caregiver fatigue may set in. So caregiver fatigue, it occurs when a caregiver feels physically and emotionally exhausted. And really you see this picture, low battery, because that's what it actually feels like, physical and emotional exhaustion, because now you have committed your time and your focus, your resources, your energy to really making sure that your loved one is cared for. But who's caring for you? You still need care too. So what are some causes of caregiver fatigue? Prioritizing the needs and interests of your loved one. You're really, really focused on them. You want to make sure that you're giving the absolute best care that you can give. And so maybe you're putting your needs on the back burner. And so this certainly can cause caregiver fatigue. Unrealistic expectations. I've had conversations with patients or families, and they say, this didn't go the way that we thought it was going to go. We thought we would be able to drop in and, in between our work schedule and with the kids. And it's just not what we thought. It's not what we thought it was going to be. So sometimes unrealistic expectations can cause us to start feeling caregiver fatigue. Lack of support. Everybody needs support. And so if you find yourself in a position that you are the sole caregiver and you don't have that family or friend support that you need, you may start to feel caregiver fatigue or feel overwhelmed. Juggling multiple commitments. As we said before, we know caregiving, it comes with a wealth of responsibilities. And so when you're juggling all of these different commitments and responsibilities, you can find yourself overwhelmed and feeling exhausted. So what are some signs of caregiver fatigue? How do you know I'm experiencing caregiver fatigue and I need an intervention, right? So anxiety or depression or any emotional disturbance could be a sign that you're feeling caregiver fatigue. Constantly feeling tired or overwhelmed. I'm not sleeping. I'm just exhausted, right? So this may be a sign that you're experiencing caregiver fatigue. Neglecting your own well-being. I haven't been able to get a shower or I haven't been able to eat. This is something that would really signal that I'm feeling caregiver fatigue. A decline in your own health. Maybe you're experiencing something that you weren't experiencing before. And this may indicate that I'm overwhelmed or I'm exhausted and experiencing caregiver fatigue. Changes in sleep pattern. So not sleeping, not getting enough sleep, and changes in appetite and weight, So these are all signs that you may be experiencing some burnout or caregiver fatigue. So how do we prevent caregiver fatigue? And not just how do we prevent it, but maybe how do we treat it if we find that we've gotten into our caregiving and now we're seeing these signs of caregiver fatigue, or how can we get ahead of it? So self-care, this piece is just so important. I know you hear it a lot, you cannot pour from an empty cup. So caring for yourself is one of the most important things that you can do in order to be able to provide the best care that you can for your loved one. Taking breaks, knowing when you need a break and being okay with taking breaks, being able to create opportunities to step away from that caregiving. It allows a moment for renewal, to be refreshed, and then to recenter and to come back and again be able to focus on giving that quality care experience to your loved one. So taking breaks. Making time for fun and leisure activities. So, taking out that time, as we talked about in the planning phase, really planning for you to have some time, and whatever it is that's fun for you, whatever leisure activities that you like to do, but leaving some time for you to be able to do that, because it really adds positively to your mental health. And again, it allows you to be the best you that you can be to provide care to your loved one. Asking for help, knowing when you're in over your head, or knowing when you need help, and not being afraid to ask for help. Whether you're asking for help from a friend or a loved one, or finally taking the opportunity to seek out some of those resources that maybe you didn't think you needed before. This will certainly help in preventing caregiver fatigue. Being confident in your role as a caregiver. You don't have to be a skilled clinician or a nurse or a doctor, or have any type of medical or professional background to be a caregiving. If you have it, a caregiver, if you have it in your heart that you want to provide care for your loved one, you want to be there for them, be confident, believe that you can, and this will certainly help it to feel less stressful, and you run into some of those things that we've identified as being contributors to caregiver fatigue. And then again, acknowledging your limitations, knowing when you're in over your head, allowing it to be okay, and being able to do any of these things: self-care, take a break, indulging in fun or leisure activities, asking for help. Allow yourself to do some of these things, so that you can, again, can give the best care that you can to your loved one. But even after doing all of these things, it's okay that sometimes it's too much. Sometimes we can get into caregiving, and we realize that this is too much for me. I need to do something different. I need some additional support. So what are some options to explore? You may explore some in-home professional caregivers. So caregivers that can come out and do all the things that you do, maybe certain days of the week or certain hours during the day. There are a lot of resources out there that help to provide care for people in their homes. And so this may be an option for you to explore if you're at the point and you're feeling like, I'm so overwhelmed, I'm so fatigued, I need to do something different. This may be something to consider. Facility care may be an option. Skilled nursing, there are assisted livings, adult foster cares. There are those types of options that you may want to explore if you're looking for a different option other than caregiving at home. If you've tried that and that's overwhelming, this is certainly also a resource as well. Hospice care is another resource if you have a loved one who is declining in health or terminally ill, and they are hospice eligible. Hospice care is certainly a support, an added support that can help you to care for your loved one. Or respite. There are programs, hospice is one of them, and there are other programs that allow for respite care, and that's when you get a break from caring for your loved one, and you can bring them to a facility where they provide care, and for however long you're allowed to bring your loved one, they can now take on that responsibility while you take a break, while you reset or do something for yourself, so that you can return back to giving care. So these are some options to explore if you decide that it's too much or you're too overwhelmed. And speaking of hospice care, if you missed it, if you go on our website, I did a presentation on the hospice journey and what to expect. So if hospice is something that may be right for you or your loved one, please go and look at this presentation, and I give more detailed information about the hospice journey, what it looks like, how to get started on that journey. And so if you have some questions about it, you may find those answers in that presentation. And so I've put here on the presentation the name of it so that you can locate it when you go to our site. And so finally, one person caring for another represents life's greatest value. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angelica. What a wonderful presentation for us today. At this time, we are going to open it up for questions. Angelica has given us a few minutes of her valuable time here to answer any questions you have, any concerns, direct any education opportunities. There are some questions that have come in on the chat, Angelica, so I'll get started as people feel free to unmute your microphone and ask directly, but so a couple questions were, Angelica. One is they appreciated your upfrontness about sharing that that individuals didn't need any formal education to be a caregiver. But they did ask, and you touched up on it a little bit, so maybe you can just expound on it a little bit more, but they did ask what they needed to know. Is there any kind of informal training that they needed? Nothing degreed like you yourself in your profession, Angelica, but anything that you would recommend that a book they read, a brochure they read, or some kind of service they could get some information on, a little more training from being a caregiver standpoint?
So that's a great question. And the answer is yes to all of the above. There are classes out there, there are support groups that really help you to learn some of the basics of caregiving, and whether it's providing personal care, even psychosocial care support. There are lots of caregiver classes, workshops, support groups that are out there that will really help in training and in learning some of the things that may be valuable to providing care. Those things are available resources for caregivers. Did I miss it? What was the other piece of the question, Jen? I forgot at the end.
I think that's a good answer. Yep. They were just looking for if there was anything in specific, and you said yes, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Does anyone have there? Like I said, there are a couple questions, but I don't want to monopolize the time. If there's anyone that you would like to, excuse me, feel free to unmute your microphone and ask Angelica directly at this time. Right there, there is one more question, and this person was very complimentary to you about the directness that you spoke about caregiver fatigue. And in particular, they wanted to know, and you did expound on this, but maybe they wanted to know exactly when you said, "I'm very tired." When can you tell that you've hit the wall? And that's a quote that they would like to know when you're providing that caregiving.
So when can you tell that you hit the wall? That's a really good one. And I think to some degree, it depends on what your definition of hitting the wall is. I'll give you a good example. For me, hitting the wall in terms of this caregiving is when I can no longer provide the what I consider to be the best care. You know, if I'm forgetting things, right? If I'm not there mentally, and I'm not being able to provide what I define as being good care, I know that I've hit the wall. If I'm getting frustrated, if I'm outwardly showing my emotions and frustration, or I'm getting angry or resentful, those are all things that can really signify that you've hit a wall, and that you're overwhelmed, and that you're frustrated, and that perhaps it's too much, and we need to start looking at some other resources or supports. It's going to be very subjective. It's going to be very specific to the person. Some people have a high tolerance for stress, and so they can kind of deal with a lot before they finally hit the wall. But then others don't have as much patience, and especially when you're in uncharted territory, especially when this happens suddenly and caregiving is not your thing, is not what you normally do. So I think from the very beginning, it's important for yourself to identify what are your boundaries, to identify, okay, how do I know when I've gotten to the point where I can't do this anymore? Put it out there at that point and know it, so that when you start to see those things or feel those things, you know that it's time to make a change or do something different.
such a good answer and lesson in life, I think, Angelica. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think we can encapsulate her answer by, listen to your head, listen to your heart. What's the best thing for you? Because if you're not, you mentioned it in your presentation, Angelica, if you're not taking care of yourself, you're not then taking care of the person that you are trying to provide that care for. So I'll just let everyone have just another second or so here to unmute yourself and ask Angelica any questions. And while you're doing that, I will remind everyone that our next Angela Cares presentation is Wednesday, June 21st with Reverend Diane Smith, and she'll be speaking directly on how social factors impact our health. Before that, we have our annual golf outing on Monday, June 12th, and I will let you know we are nearly sold out. So if you are interested in golfing and participating in one of the fundraisers that help out our patients and family and community members here with an Angela Hospice, you'll want to log on to our website and reserve that spot for the golf outing on Monday, June 12th. And then, of course, when you're on our website, there's other opportunities to participate in our raffle. There's an auction going on, some great things that we encourage you to get involved with Angela Hospice, in addition to joining us at our next Angela Cares. If there aren't any more questions, I think we need to let Angelica get back to her most important job here with Angela Hospice. But before we do, we wanted to thank you very much, Angelica, for your wonderful and insightful and, of course, educational presentation today. And we appreciate your time that you always give us and enlighten us. And thank you all very much for joining us. We will see you on Wednesday, June 21st. If not, we'll see you on the golf course on Monday, June 12th. Have a great day, everyone. Thanks for
Thanks,
joining us.
everybody.